Welcome, everybody. I'm Dr. Laura Chesick, Associate Dean of the Graduate School, and on behalf of Dean Weiner and all of the rest of the Graduate School and our students who are here today, welcome and thank you so much for coming. I know the students are really excited, so am I. We think you're going to have a great time because we've seen the preliminary rounds of this competition, and the students have done a great job. This is the 3-minute thesis, which was started by the University of Queensland out in Australia. They have trademarked this process, so we follow their regulations in exchange for being able to use their materials. It's designed to encourage research-engaged graduate students to speak to anybody and everybody about what they're doing in an engaging and communicative fashion. All right? We have some very strict rules that the participants already know about. They get one PowerPoint slide, no fancy animations or transitions or movements of any kind, no additional electronic media, no props, no costumes, darn. You may see a laser pointer, that's allowed. They have exactly 3 minutes, not 1 second over. So we've told them that so long as they stop when they're told stop, we won't disqualify them. If they don't stop, they will be disqualified, and we don't want that to happen, okay? And the decision of our esteemed judges will be final, okay? These are the criteria that our judges will use. These are set by Queensland, and the judges have a scoring rubric that expands upon these 3 main criteria. So they'll be doing their scoring in between students, so they may need a minute or two in between each student to quickly make their assessment before we all agree that we can move on. So in the meantime, you as the audience may want to jot some notes for yourself unless you've already decided who you're going to vote for. All right. And our judging panel today, starting at the end, we have Dr. Stephen Holland from Economics, Dr. Celia Dickinson, who earned her Doctorate of Education at UNCG in 1991 and is back as a member of the Alumni Board, Dr. Marianne LaGreco from Communication Studies, Ms. Betsy Robinson from University Relations, and Dr. Jonathan Zarecki from Classical Studies. Yes. They don't entirely know it yet, but they have a tough job ahead of them, so thank you for your acknowledgement of that. You as the audience are going to have a tough job too. You have a vote, a ballot in your program for the People's Choice Award. And when we break for intermission and the judges go in here and we tally up their scores, and you will be invited to have some refreshments in the small room off to the side across the hallway through the back doors. Before you go for refreshments, please leave your ballot, and we will count your ballots for the People's Choice Award. The top prize today is $1,000, second prize is $500, and the People's Choice Award is another $250. So you may pick one of the same top 2 people that the judges end up selecting, or you may have a third person that you like. We'll just have to see. All right, so you will be voting as well. One thing we would like you to do, please take a minute and turn off the sound on any electronic devices that you have with you so that our students are not interrupted by a ringing phone or something like that. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you the name and the presentation title of each student. I'll give that student the microphone, and the student's 3 minutes will start when that student starts talking. All right? And they're able, you can't see it, but there's a laptop with a countdown timer up here in front, so they'll know how much time they have left. All right, we would like to invite up Connie Albert from Information Systems and Supply Chain Management. The title of Connie's presentation is Protecting Children Online, Examining Predatory Behavior and Victimization of Children Within Social Media.
Every year, approximately 1.2 million children are aggressively solicited while they're online. This type of solicitation involves an adult attempting to entice that child into an offline meeting. The intent of that adult? To engage in an illegal sex act with that child. These adults are referred to as online sexual predators. In any given moment, there are up to 750,000 predators online. The internet is their key to my house, to your houses, and to our nation's children. Impassioned to be part of the solution to this problem, I examine over 500 transcripts of conversations between online sexual predators and potential victims. The goal is to identify patterns of predatory behavior inside of the social media being used to victimize children. The aim? To improve pattern recognition programming for computer software in order to detect online sexual predators. In this research, we examined the interaction of vulnerable behaviors elicited by children and coercive behaviors produced by predators in social media conversations. To this point, we have identified 3 categories of predators. Camouflagers try to blend in with the friends of the children online, waiting for them to display vulnerable behaviors before they coerce them to victimization. Baiters lead with coercive behaviors in an attempt to bring that children to victimization inside of social media. And unfortunately, trappers don't look for vulnerabilities, nor do they use coercion. They go straight to victimization inside of social media. Now, the victimizations that we've identified inside of social media range from the use of emoticons, such as winking, or unfortunately representing genitalia, to the use of a webcam to expose themselves and potential sex acts to our children. This is the first information system study to examine and identify patterns of predatory behavior inside of social media. This is going to bring us one step closer to creating computer software programs that can automatically detect online sexual predators in conversations with children. We'll be able to inform educational programs for law enforcement, educators, and psychologists, and hopefully the parents and guardians of our children. Can you picture a world where the internet is not the key that predators have to our children? Can you imagine an internet that is safe for children to use for education, socialization, and entertainment? I can, and this research is one step closer to the realization of that imagining. Thank you.
All right, next we're going to invite up Courtney Brown from nursing. The title of Courtney's presentation is Noise in Operating Rooms as a Risk Factor for Confusion, an Exploratory Study.
Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Brown, and I'm a nurse anesthetist. I've been providing anesthesia in the operating rooms for the last 7 years. When I decided to pursue my PhD in nursing, I wanted to study one particular problem: postoperative confusion in the elderly. Imagine kissing your grandparent or aging parent prior to going back for surgery, only to meet them 2 to 3 hours later, completely confused, climbing over side rails. And this confusion can persist for months, days, years, lead them to institutionalization, nursing home placement, and even death. So first I did an extensive research analysis as to what's been looked at. And what I found is, in the medical population, the environment has been extensively researched, with noise being found as a risk factor in the ICUs. But when I looked at the risk factors in terms of the operation after a surgery, very little research had been done on the environment, and not a single study on the environment of the operating room. So I devised a small research study. I recruited 134 elders participating in having a total knee or total hip operation. Of those, 50 continued through the entire study. I decided to collect the data during their entire length of the procedure, roughly 1 to 2 hours of a total knee or total hip arthroplasty. I recorded noise levels at their ear with a sound dosimeter, and one place in the operating room environment measuring noise in both loudness and pitch levels. And what I found was the noise was excessive. In fact, the peak levels approached that of a lawnmower, with maximum averages of heavy noise and averages around quiet conversation exceeding all limits set by Environmental Protection Agency, the World Health Organization, and OSHA. In terms of recommendations, I think there should be more research. The problem was only 7 of my participants went on to have delirium. I didn't have enough numbers to determine if noise was a risk factor. However, the noise did exceed all those studies in which in the ICU noise was found to be a risk factor for delirium. In addition, all those operating room personnel are exposed to these excessive noise limits. Those include the surgeons, the nurses, the people taking care of these people. They should be given, for example, possible hearing protection. They're also at risk for noise-induced hearing loss, as well as increased blood pressure related to the noise they're exposed to. So in terms of going forward, there should be education of operating room personnel to the dangers of noise exposure, as well as possible earplugs given to people having surgery, especially our elders. Thank you for your time and attention.
All right, next we're going to invite up Anthony Dellinger from Nanoscience. Anthony's presentation is entitled Exploring the Use of Nanomaterials for Diagnosing and Treating Diseases.
Good evening, everyone. 3 minutes to do a thesis. This is almost as hard as getting our PhD in 4 years. But what I have here today is a fullerene. I'm going to give you all a little science background. We're going to talk about fullerenes, contrast agents, and then atherosclerosis. This right here is a fullerene. We can fit about 75,000 of these across the diameter of a strand of hair. Don't pull out your hair. Inside of these, I've encapsulated gadolinium. Gadolinium is a contrast agent. When we build these fullerenes in the presence of these heavy metals, they spontaneously form inside of them. Modern contrast agents are gadolinium-based, but they're chelated, which means we can't really functionalize them. We can't tell them where to go or what to do. Plus, there's also a toxicity issue. So we got fullerenes and current contrast agents. Let's move on to atherosclerosis. And let's just say, for the sake of time, this is what causes the heart attack. We have cells circulating our body called macrophages. These cells have a lot of receptors on them, a lot of different types of receptors on them. But in a certain situation, certain receptors become upregulated. And these receptors that I'm looking at are called CD36. They're like gloves. They're grabbing plaque. Whenever you eat the Big Mac, they're looking for all that plaque. These cells are going to change when they consume this plaque. They become sticky or foam cells. This then lodges in your arteries. And when these rupture at an inopportune point, this is when the heart attack occurs. Right now, we don't know how to detect this. We have to wait for a heart attack to occur before we can provide proper intervention. This is something that needs to be advanced by doctors. So what I was thinking was, with my fullerene here, with the contrast agent inside of it, why not decorate the outside with something that looks like cholesterol? Then these cells would want to take this up. So for the first time, we could send these through the body and have targeted delivery of contrast. Instead of them grabbing cholesterol, they're going to start grabbing my contrast agent, consuming it and getting a buildup of it at a specific location. When this happens, we can then visualize it. We can use MRI contrast and show where these plaque lesions are. So for instance, in my study here, we can see that whenever a fullerene was put inside a mouse that was predisposed to atherosclerosis, we could detect where these plaque lesions were. This gives us the opportunity to intervene before the patient has the heart attack. We can go through, make the necessary intervention, and give them a better quality of life. Hopefully, this will become a reality very soon. Fullerene, it's a small molecule with a big future. Thanks a lot.
Next, we're going to invite up Stephanie Gardner-Walsh from Specialized Education Services. Stephanie's presentation today is entitled Mild or Unilateral Hearing Loss. Say what?
I need you for a second to imagine I hand you one of these mild chilies, and I need you to bite into it. Some of you, I've noticed, have made a face something like, ugh. Others of you are kind of smiling at me. Some of you have not even bitten into this chili. Now, question is, what does this chili have to do with hearing loss? Absolutely nothing. Okay, what's really important is the word that I use to describe it, the adjective, mild. Mild, when applied to a chili, has a wide spectrum of effects. The same thing happens with hearing loss. Mild, when describing hearing loss, has a range of effects from barely noticeable to extremely detrimental. My dissertation focuses on this phenomenon. In a way, I'm kind of looking for hot chilies in a mild sauce. In 1984, Bess and Tharp found that 50% of children with mild or unilateral hearing loss will fail at least one academic grade. 35% of children will require special education services. These results have not changed in 30 years. Research has been conducted and found that children have problems with reading, language, literacy, social, and functional abilities. However, no one knows what 50% of these children are. Who are these children? That's where I come in. My dissertation looks at two groups of students: the students who are successful academically and those who are struggling academically, who have failed at least one academic grade. I'm looking at typical risk factors such as gender, socioeconomic status, language background, family household status, as well as audiological information, all of their hearing stuff. I want to know, what is the pattern in these children who are failing? Most of the time, the medical professionals say none of these children should be failing. They only have a little tiny bit of a hearing loss. Their ears should be hearing everything just fine, but obviously it's not happening. My goal for this study is to determine if it is just general risk factors or if it is something audiological or a combination. If I can do this, I would like to take that information and get it out to the medical professionals. The medical professionals are typically the people who intervene with parents early on. It also needs to go out to the teachers. Often, mild hearing loss is identified in early K1-2 experiences. If I can get it out to medical professionals, teachers, parents, speech pathologists, and audiologists, my hope is that these children will not end up failing and that our 50% will reduce to 0%. In a way, I want to give the glass of milk before the chili gets too hot. Thank you.
All right, next we're going to invite up Jasraj Gramopadilla from the Department of Geography. The title of his presentation is Economic Growth or Environmental Protection? What shall we prioritize?
Thank you. Shall I start? Okay, good afternoon, guys. Economic growth and environmental protection, these two often emerge as conflicting priorities because with more and more economic growth, we tend to be more urban, lifestyle changes, and then we end up using a lot more resources and produce a lot more waste and pollutants. So that is why it is essential to make this choice. What shall we prefer? Now, I would like you to imagine that you are a decision maker. You have to make the choice. How would you go about it? It wouldn't be easy because it would be difficult to please everyone at the same time. And so what kind of tool would be most valuable to you if you have to make this decision? I think a metric based on scientific data which will be able to communicate the information effectively to you and other stakeholders would be most valuable. And that is what I have done in my research. I started up with different sustainability indicators, and for economic growth, I had income, employment, business revenue, and things like that. For environment, I considered air and water pollution, biodiversity, patients treated for asthma. So those were my indicators. Then I used principal component analysis, a statistical technique, to aggregate those indicators into indices. And as a result of that, eventually I have an economic index and an environmental index. Now please note a legend on each of these indices and to understand what is least desirable and what is most desirable. Now these maps, they are meant to be compared with each other before making a choice. And what we can do is we can say that counties with high economic growth and high environmental impact, they should better prefer environmental protection. Whereas counties which have moderate growth and moderate environmental impact, they can still allow economic growth to continue, but with caution and close monitoring. Whereas the counties which have low economic growth and low environmental impact, I think they still have time to allow that growth to continue without having to worry too much about immediate impact on the environment. Now that's the whole point, and I think the value of these indices lies in the fact that in their ease of their use and their appeal to expert as well as non-expert audience. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to invite up Megan Kemery from Specialized Education Services. The title of Megan's presentation today is, Are You Deaf or Hard of Hearing? Which do you go by? Perceptions of Students with Hearing Loss.
Have you ever judged a book by its cover, only to find out after you get to know the characters, the setting, and the plot, that what you thought that book was about is different from what's on those pages? We all do it. We all make assumptions based on first impressions. We do it to others, and they do it to us. Everybody in this room can probably think of a time where the way they perceive themselves differed from how others viewed them. Are you deaf or hard of hearing? Which do you go by? This is the title of my study and was also a question that I was asked many years ago as a student. So I conducted a study where I talked with 10 different participants. We had in-depth interviews where I asked them questions about their identity and their hearing loss. 4 of my participants were students ages 12 to 17 who also had hearing loss, and the remaining 6 were their caregivers or parents, because research shows that caregivers play a crucial role on identity development in their children. So the results of my study showed that there's a continuum of identity types. Now, these identity types have already been established in the literature in deafness, but my study found that 3 factors influenced which identity type was selected: interaction with others, environment, setting, or context, and life experiences, both those in the past and what they currently face today. So as you can see, we have hearing, person with hearing loss, culturally deaf, medically deaf, hard of hearing, and others that are up there in the slide. For example, you could have a student in a quiet setting like a classroom where he could access that instruction and hear the teacher. He may select the hearing identity type, even though he has hearing loss and wears hearing aids. Yet that same student in a different setting, a noisy setting such as the cafeteria, during lunch where he may struggle to access communication among his peers, he may select a deaf or a hard of hearing identity type. So identity is fluid. It changes depending on these 3 factors: interaction with others, environment, setting, or context, and life experiences. Why does this matter? To be self-actualized individuals and to advocate for ourselves, we have to know how we define ourselves and convey that to others. Caregivers, parents, teachers, counselors, and other school professionals need to realize that the way they view their children may differ from how the children see themselves. This can also be applied to students in other populations: students with learning disabilities, students with autism, students from other cultural backgrounds, even different religions. You name it, we all have different backgrounds. But no matter who we're studying and looking at in terms of identity and how they perceive themselves compared to how others perceive them, we must realize people are people first and to not judge a book by its cover. Thank you for your time.
Next, let's invite up Emily Marcinowski from the Department of Psychology. The topic of Emily's presentation today is called Building a Foundation During Infancy.
When infants play, they're learning about their environment. And so when we study the development of play behaviors, we're actually studying the development of the brain and how it accesses information from the environment. Now, I'm interested in a play behavior called construction, or merging multiple objects into a single structure. So an example of this would be stacking blocks into a tower. You could have assembling a jigsaw puzzle, things kind of like that. Now, this is important for us to study because a child who constructs is learning that multiple objects can become one single object. So for example, I can turn 5 blocks into one tower as long as I stack them. In addition, a child who constructs is learning that the properties of objects can change when you construct with them or manipulate them in a certain way. So for example, a block tower is very delicate, it's easy to tip over and break, whereas the blocks themselves are not quite so delicate. Now typically this study, or this play behavior is studied in 2 to 5-year-olds, but these kids are already pretty good at constructing behaviors. So there's not a lot of information about the way that children initially learn how to construct, which we believe begins during late infancy. So the purpose of my study is to look at how children initially learn to construct during late infancy, since there's not a lot of information on that. So what I did is I invited infants into our little lab, and I played with them. I gave them toys like blocks and cups, and I observed their behavior by video recording each visit from the ages of 10 to 14 months across 5 monthly visits, and I marked how well they did at each age. Now what we found is 10 to 12-month-olds, they're not very good at constructing at all. They can maybe put 2 blocks together, but that's really it, and a lot can't even do that. Now, in contrast, in 13 and 14-month-olds, you'll see that 57% of 14-month-olds could build a structure with more than 3 objects in them, and everybody can construct by this age. So what we've learned is that in a skill that was once tested in 2 to 5-year-olds, we now know manifests in late infancy. Now, construction is also interesting to study because it's thought to affect the development of language at later ages, particularly for spatial prepositions. So for example, if a child is learning to construct, they're learning about spatial concepts. So what is the consequence of placing a block on another block versus placing a cup in another cup? And so when they learn these spatial concepts, they're more able to learn the words associated with these spatial concepts. And so we're actually studying the development of language before a child can even speak. So the next time you watch a child play, I hope you'll see that not only are they just amused in the moment, but they're also building a foundation for later cognitive abilities like language. Thanks.
All right, now we're going to invite up Michelle Pye from Kinesiology. The title of Michelle's presentation today is Comparison of Neuromuscular Control Strategies Between Collegiate Female Dancers and Athletes.
Imagine you're the starting point guard of your high school basketball team and you're playing in the final 30 seconds of your championship game. Down by 1, you take the ball up the court, you see a clear lane to the basket, you weave through your opponent's traffic, you plant, cut, and pop. You fall to the ground, grabbing your knee, knowing in that moment not only did you lose the game, but you also tore your ACL. Your anterior cruciate ligament, or ACL, is the primary stabilizing ligament of the knee. Injury to this ligament can lead to a year-long rehabilitation, as well as costly medical bills and an increased risk for osteoarthritis within 10 years of injury, whether you have surgery or not. Therefore, we need to find ways to prevent this injury. What we know currently is that ACL injuries typically occur during a non-contact jumping or cutting movement. We also know that our neuromuscular control, or more simply put, how quickly our muscle responds and the joint motion plays a large role in our ACL injury risk. We also know that our neuromuscular control patterns are affected by the type of activity or training that we participate in. Specifically, dance training, with its focus on postural control, neutral alignment, and balance, leads to increased muscular reflex and decreased forces throughout the knee. This may be why there is a lower rate of ACL injury in female dancers compared to soccer and basketball athletes. However, no one has yet directly compared the neuromuscular control patterns between these two populations. Therefore, the purpose of my dissertation is to directly compare the neuromuscular control, specifically the balance control, joint motion, and muscular activation of collegiate female dancers and athletes during 3 functional tasks commonly associated with ACL injury. These 3 tasks will be a forward hop stabilization task, double leg drop jump, as well as an unanticipated perturbation. This perturbation will mimic a crossover cut, which again is commonly seen at the time of injury. From this, we hope to find a female population that has a protective neuromuscular control pattern, which will enhance our ability to develop an ACL prevention program that teaches our athletes safe movement and muscular activation patterns. With that, we would hope our 16-year-old star basketball athlete would not tear her ACL, will not suffer from knee osteoarthritis at the ripe age of 26, and hopefully not lose her basketball game. Thank you.
All right, let's invite up Minita Sangvi from Consumer Apparel and Retail Studies. The title of Minita's presentation today is Marketing the Female Politician, Examining the Role of Appearance Management Using Freud's Psychoanalytic Theory, or Why We Don't Have a Female President Yet.
Why is it that we as a society are more interested in Hillary Clinton's pantsuits, Sarah Palin's beauty pageant, Nancy Pelosi's plastic surgery, than we are on their viewpoints on energy, defense, or healthcare? From the 1800s to the recent 2012 elections, women politicians have received about 30% more coverage on what they wear rather than what they say vis-a-vis their male counterparts. This diminishes their substantive value and limits their political success. Women comprise only 18.3% of Congress. Only 5 of the 50 governors are women. And the United States ranks 77th in the world for female representation of government. Well, wow. All right. My study spans political marketing, women's studies, and appearance management to examine this problem. I apply Freud's theory to understand how men and women's power dynamics manifest in modern day political marketing. According to Freud, women are objects of exchange, objects of desire in our society, while men are subjects. And when a woman politician is running for office, she's attempting to move from object space to subject space. And this creates anxiety in men who feel that they will lose their strength and position of dominance in society. So they focus on her appearance to objectify her and push her back into object space. I used a qualitative research methodology, and taking a phenomenological approach, I interviewed over 33 people over the last 3 months, from a governor to senator to other women politicians who became the center of this phenomenon. I also interviewed their staff, aides, and political consultants who helped create this phenomenon. And finally, I interviewed political action committees, members of media, and volunteers who helped disseminate the phenomenon, and voters who consumed this phenomenon. This study right now is in its final stages of data analysis. We have had 300 pages of single-space transcription notes. This research is the first of its kind in the field of women's studies and political marketing. It spans not just the Bryan School of Business, but also the Women's Studies Department at Duke University. Because of this, because it's the first research that looks at unconscious biases for women politicians, it has tremendous theoretical implications for our society, for research, and for both these fields. But it also may help us elect the first female president of the United States of America. Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to invite up Kara Wagoner from the Department of Biology. The title of Kara's presentation today is Sustainable Solutions to Improve Honeybee Health.
In her lifetime, a honeybee produces only 1/12 a teaspoon of honey. meaning you can thank at least a dozen bees and thousands of flowers for every spoonful of honey you eat. Honeybees are also known for other products, including wax we use to make candles, and propolis, known for its antimicrobial properties. But maybe more importantly, honeybees are known for their pollination services, including pollination of natural ecosystems and pollination of crops. In the United States, honeybees contribute $16.4 billion worth of crops every single year. The problem is honeybees are dying. So many of you may have heard of this in the context of colony collapse disorder, or CCD, but the reality is that honeybees have been declining for decades. And there are many different reasons for this, including mismanagement, pesticide exposure, and natural parasites and diseases. See, when honeybees are used for crop pollination, hives are stacked onto 18-wheeler trucks and they're shipped around the country. When they arrive at their destination, they're generally met with a monoculture that's been treated with a lot of different types of pesticides. A recent study found an average of 6.5 pesticides per sample in 749 bee, pollen, and wax samples. What's more, the close proximity to the hives to one another means that natural parasites and diseases can spread between the hives. An example of such a parasite is Varroa destructor, shown here. This mite is not only a burden in and of itself, but it also passes diseases between honeybees. What's more, many beekeepers feel the need to put pesticides directly into their hive to treat and prevent the mites from taking over the colony. So I study sustainable solutions to improve honeybee health. In much the same way that hounds have been bred to be better trackers, honeybees have been bred to be better smellers. And this actually allows them to detect and remove parasitized bees from the hive. This activity is known as hygienic behavior and has been traditionally selected for based on the removal of brood that's frozen, brood is baby bees, that are frozen from the hive. So I want to improve on this system by developing a selection method that's specific to the Varroa mite. So I study the external chemical composition of honeybees that are parasitized to see how it differs from that of non-parasitized bees. And once I identify these chemicals, I'll be able to improve selection for hygienic behavior. This will lead to healthier, more productive bees, meaning more and safer bee products, healthier natural ecosystems, and more efficient crop pollination, making life just a little bit sweeter for all of us. Thanks.
All right, folks, what happens next is we'll take a brief break for an intermission. You're welcome to have some refreshments, which are in the room across the hall, but before you enjoy the refreshments, please be sure to leave us your People's Choice ballot, 1 vote per ballot, please. And while you're enjoying the refreshments and our judges are tallying their results, we will also be counting the People's Choice votes for that award. All right? So give us a few minutes here. Please help yourself to refreshments, and please give us your votes. Do we all agree that this was a lot of work? Both for our students and for our judges. I think they all deserve an enormous round of applause. This was really exciting for me because I got to see the preliminary rounds, and I know how hard the students worked between the preliminary round and the final round to keep perfecting what they wanted to offer you today. So I know it means a great deal to them, and it means a great deal to all of us as well. All right, so no further suspense. May I have the People's Choice Award winner please come up? That is Michelle Pye. The People's Choice Prize is worth $250. Congratulations, Michelle. All right. I will invite the second place winner to please come up. This prize is worth $500. This is Stephanie Gardner-Walsh. And our first place winner today, worth $1,000, is Connie Albert. Thank you so much. I hope you all had a good time, right? Yes? I know everybody up here did. Go out and proselytize. Tell more students how much fun this was and that they should try this the next time it comes around, and start spreading the word. Thank you for coming. Stay and enjoy refreshments and talk to the students. Thank you.